Hello, YouTubers and NFL fans everywhere. This is Matt, the NFL Fanatic, giving you my Week 6 2022 NFL predictions. Well, after the great week the Fanatic had last week, the NFL just this week decided to give me a good old fistful of reality and a reality check. Because, boy, I had a fall from grace, both in my against the spread and straight up picks, to where I was last week, where I had two winning records last week with both my against the spread and straight up picks. This week, unfortunately, and this has been a really rough year for me, I've had another 2 losing weeks in both my against the spread and straight up picks. So this week against the spread so far, I am 6-8-1 against the spread, and straight up I went 7-8. So that equals the 44.3% against the spread and straight up 46.7%. So all those winnings I had through the first 5 weeks of the season all went kaput at that point. And now I'm back a bit under, back a bit under the gun. But now for the year, and by the way, I got the 6-8-1 due to the push from the Minnesota Vikings winning by 7 against the Chicago Bears, 29-22. But now overall for the year, though, I am now 37-40-2 against the spread. And straight up now, I am 42-36-1. So, in the grand scheme of things, in all seriousness, I am very happy with my against the spread record so far through 5 weeks of the season. I am near 50% already, at this point. Maybe hopefully this week with my spread picks, with some of the numbers being as close as they are, it should be easier to get some against the spread picks chosen correctly. And straight up, boy, if anybody had both New York football teams winning today, I actually did know a person that actually took both New York football teams. And what a story for the New York market for football anyway. 7-3 combined in their first 10 games. So what a start for New York that they haven't had since 2011, or the feeling from the Giants back in 2011 when they won the Super Bowl. That's how good both New York teams have been. And for the Jets themselves, this is the best they felt since 2010. The Rex Ryan era, when they, had this good of a team. And actually, after what happened with the Mets, sorry for all Mets fans, if you're just used to it, though, because you're a Mets fan. I know it's a history. I'm not the biggest baseball fan, but I do know that the Mets have had a history of choking for most of their existence. So, sorry to hear that. But at least you both can, at least all the Mets fans now can get on board the New York train of either the Jets or the Giants. Because they are both playing incredibly effective football and winning football. First time since, I think, Week 8 of 2015 that both the New York Giants and the New York Jets had winning records through the first 5 weeks of the season at this point. So, congratulations there. But, those 2 games were shockers. You had the Cowboys and Rams. That one was, an interesting game to where I thought about it in the grand scheme of things, and maybe I should have thought about how bad that Rams offensive line has been. Matthew Stafford's already been sacked 21 times this year, which I believe is leading the league. He hasn't looked great at all. The Rams' running attack is ranked worst in the NFL at 32nd. Besides Cooper Kupp, who probably will have the NFL record for the most targets in a given season, they really don't throw the football out. I guess they do throw to Tyler Higbee, but Tyler Higbee's not a really big playmaker. He's more of a stick mover instead of a playmaker. So I think that is a significant issue there. But I thought Cooper and the Cowboys weren't going to do enough. And Cooper Rush, he only completed 10 passes for 102 yards, and he had not scored a touchdown. Though they did run. The key thing for the Cowboys was they ran for 162 yards on the ground. That was Tony Pollard and Zeke combined. And, the first series of the game, Dorrance Armstrong gets a strip sack on Stafford, and then Lawrence gets the 12-yard touchdown return. The very next series, Dorrance Armstrong gets a blocked punt. They couldn't move the ball, but they got a 9-point lead at that point. And then Maher just kicked, and then Pollard had the big run. Really, those 3 plays of offense was all needed for the Cowboys to win that game. But that was a shocking loss, or a surprising loss. Seattle, New Orleans, what a shootout there. 32-39. Who would have thought who would have thought the best quarterback on the field was a guy that's being now listed at tight end? Taysom Hill had himself a day. 120 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. He had a 22-yard touchdown pass to Adam Troutman. for his 4th touchdown. He blocked. He had 2 kick returns. He made some great special teams plays. He is such a jack of all trades. It was just downright amazing seeing that game. But to be fair though, Geno and them, they put up about 300 plus yards of offense. They have a top 10 offense in terms of both points and yards, which I definitely didn't think was Geno Smith that was going to be possible. But at the end of the day, that defense just kept giving up yards. Alvin Kamara had 192 scrimmage yards. But 192 scrimmage yards. That is the second most amount of scrimmage yards he's had in his career as a Saint. So that's how you lose that one. Jacksonville and Houston. And I just want to say, and I'll get to my picks here in 1 second. I just want to make one more thing about one thing about Jacksonville and Houston. Everybody out there, William Trevor Lawrence, and by the way, that is his government name. I'm not talking about. William Trevor Lawrence. Everybody that believed that this guy was a generational talent, a generational prospect. Are you rethinking that now? Because he was abysmal yesterday. They were 0 of 3 on 4th down. He threw 2 horrible interceptions. I can understand that, he had to try to heave the second one, but that wasn't even close. They were at the 20-yard line when he threw that one. And he just looks lost, and you can't, against the worst team in the National Football League by record. You could say other teams are better or worse. You can't lose to Davis Mills, and for the 9th straight time to Houston Texans. I don't know what it is, but that man is not nearly as good as anybody thinks that he was. Everybody wanted to give him a pass. And, and I get Urban Meyer. And Urban Meyer deserves a lot of blame. Everybody wanted to throw Urban Meyer, out the dry and say, oh, Trevor Lawrence's bad play for that 3-14 team where he led with Stafford for interceptions. Oh, that was just bad, coach. That wasn't anything on William Trevor Lawrence himself. Well, are you not rethinking that, everybody? He's had 6 turnovers the last 2 games. He cost them the game against the Eagles, and he was abysmal against the Texans. I'm telling you right now, in that class, Mac Jones is lapping the field around, and Mac Jones isn't even playing. Zach Wilson's better than Trevor Lawrence. Not only did it beat him last year, he has the same amount of wins. And, if I really wanted to be petty, Davis Mills, the 3rd-round pick out of Stanford, that I know talent-wise is not better than Trevor, but he's 2-0 against him. So, you could argue Trevor Lawrence might, on resume, he's the worst quarterback of that class. Holistically. Really. I just had to get out my chest because I really looked at Trevor Lawrence in that first year and thought that he wasn't as great as everybody thought. I thought that was a little bit more on him than people wanted to give. And I think now, through 5 games, especially after that performance, I think people really have to start thinking about, is Trevor Lawrence going to be that generational prospect? Because I would say no. But, we'll see. But that was my little diatribe there. But let me get to my picks. One more quick thing before that. It is the official start of the bye portion of the NFL season. So, for the next several weeks, until about week 14 or 15, there will be teams on byes every single week. So, the 4 teams this week that are on byes are the Detroit Lions, the Houston Texans, the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Tennessee Titans. So, once again, for everybody out there, Detroit, Houston, Las Vegas, and Tennessee are on bye this week, so they will not be playing. So, if you have Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, DeAndre Swift, DJ Chark, Damian Pierce, Nico Collins, Brandon Cooks, O.J. Howard, Derek Carr, Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, Daniel Carlson, I'm trying to think here, Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill, the Titans defense, Randy Bullock. If you have any of those players on your fantasy teams, bench them this week because they will not be playing in week 6. Alright, it's time for my picks for this week. So, on Thursday, when the 1-4 Washington Commanders travel to Chicago to take on the 2-3 Chicago Bears, the Chicago Bears are 1-point favorites in this game. Give me Chicago here, -1, and Chicago straight up. And then on Sunday, when the 3-2 San Francisco 49ers travel to Atlanta to take on the 2-3 Atlanta Falcons, the San Francisco 49ers are 6-point favorites in this game. I'm going to take San Francisco here, -6, and San Francisco straight up. Then the next game, when the 2-3 New England Patriots travel to Cleveland to take on the 2-3 Cleveland Browns, the Cleveland Browns are 3-point favorites in this game. Give me the Cleveland Browns here, -3, and the Cleveland Browns straight up. Then the next game, when the 3-2 New York Jets travel to Green Bay to take on the 3-2 Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers are 7.5-point favorites in this game. I'm going to take the Green Bay Packers here to win straight up, but give me the New York Jets here plus 7.5. Then the next game, when the 2-3 Jacksonville Jaguars travel to Indianapolis to take on the 2-1 Indianapolis Colts. The Indianapolis Colts are 1.5-point favorites in this game. In one of my first upsets of the weekend, I'm going to take Jacksonville here plus 1.5 and Jacksonville straight up. Then the next game, when the 4-1 Minnesota Vikings travel to Miami to take on the 3-2 Miami Dolphins. The Minnesota Vikings are 3-point favorites in this game. Give me the Minnesota Vikings here -3 and the Minnesota Vikings straight up. Then the next game, when the 2-3 Cincinnati Bengals travel to New Orleans to take on the 2-3 New Orleans Saints. The Cincinnati Bengals are 1-point favorites in this game. Give me the Cincinnati Bengals here -1 and Cincinnati straight up. Then the next game, when the 3-2 Baltimore Ravens travel to New York to take on the 4-1 New York Giants. The Baltimore Ravens are 6-point favorites in this game. I'm going to take the New York Giants here +6, but I'm going to take Baltimore straight up. Then the next game, when the 3-2 Tampa Bay Buccaneers travel to Pittsburgh to take on the 1-4 Pittsburgh Steelers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 8.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Tampa Bay here -8.5, and give me Tampa Bay straight up. Then the next game, when the 1-4 Carolina Panthers travel to Los Angeles to take on the 2-3 Los Angeles Rams. The Los Angeles Rams are 9.5-point favorites in this game. Give me the Los Angeles Rams here to win straight up, but I'm going to take Carolina +9.5. The next game, when the 2-3 Arizona Cardinals travel to Seattle to take on the 2-3 Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks are 2.5-point underdogs in this game. In my second pure upset of the weekend, I'm going to take Seattle here +2.5 and Seattle straight up. Then in one of the biggest rematches and biggest games of the entire year, when the 4-1 Buffalo Bills travel to Kansas City to take on the 4-1 or 3-2 Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs are 2-point underdogs in this game. In my third and final outright upset of the entire weekend, I'm going to take Kansas City here +2 and Kansas City straight up. And then on Sunday Night Football, when the 4-1 Dallas Cowboys travel to Philadelphia to take on the only undefeated team left in the National Football League, the 5-0 Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles are 5-point favorites to win this game. Give me the Dallas Cowboys here +5, but I'm going to take the Philadelphia Eagles straight up. And then finally, in the Monday night game, when the 2-3 Denver Broncos travel to Los Angeles to take on the 3-2 Los Angeles Chargers. The Los Angeles Chargers are 6-point favorites in this game. Give me the Los Angeles Chargers here -6 and Los Angeles Chargers straight up. Alright, so time for my thoughts on each game. Chicago over Washington. I am going to take Chicago here based on the fact that the Commanders have just not been very good. They really, last week, or yesterday, everybody, the Commanders combined, every single one of their players, they only ran for a grand total of 43 yards against the Titans defense. Which, hasn't had Harold Landry all year. Bud Dupree's been out of it. The secondary's not that great, but they only amassed 43 rushing yards. And for Washington, really all their scoring probably came from De'Ami Brown, who had 2 receptions for 105 yards, including that incredible one-handed 75-yard touchdown catch. And two other interesting stats that I found out was that now, for the past 5 years, the Commanders have at least had 4-game losing streaks in the past 5 consecutive seasons. And one of the biggest problems defensively that the Commanders have been facing is the fact that they cannot turn the ball over. The entire year, the Washington defense, even with Chase Young and his injuries and all the different stuff that they've had to go through defensively with injuries, and they benched William Jackson due to, I assume, poor play. It happened to be that they've only forced 1 turnover the entire year through 5 games. That is abysmal for a defense that has some talented defenders on it, a defensive coach that prides himself on generating pass rush and generating consistent, plays, but forcing only 1 turnover the whole year, that's not great. And I think that's a big contributing factor to why the Commanders are at this 1-4 start. And Carson Wentz threw, another typical Carson Wentz kind of choking throw game away. And I will tell this to everybody. I genuinely believe that Carson Wentz in the Commanders, if he loses this game, which I think he will, I think the Commanders have to strongly consider putting Sam Howell in for the rest of the year and see what they have in him. Because I just feel like Carson can't be losing these games in this fashion with the talent he has, and it just falls to Ron Rivera's job, because Ron Rivera, I think at the end of this year, if this team has another losing season, he will probably get fired, and I think Carson will probably not have another job as a starter in the league. I do think he's a talented enough person to be a backup, but he will never be a starter in this league ever again. And it was interesting though, because like I wasn't the biggest Justin Fields fan. I'm still not. And I remember what I said last week. But Justin Fields, and again, through the first half of the game, he was 3 of 8 for 73 yards through the first half of the game against the Vikings. But, the Bears, they started to run the ball a bit better. Montgomery had 2 big touchdowns, a rushing one and a receiving one. But in that second half, he threw for about 100 yards, and a touchdown was 11 to 12. And it just comes down to this to me. Okay, and I know Chicago, look, they've lost 7 of the last 8 against the Commanders overall, so I'm really taking a risk here. But to me, this game comes down to which player do I think has the best chance to cost the team the game. I'm just going to hope that Carson Wentz, as he's had against very good defenses, a Bears defense that has shown a lot of good flashes, and, has been a solid, consistent defense with young guys and veterans like Roquan and Eddie, that they can get Carson Wentz to force one more mistake or error compared to Justin Fields. Also, I think Justin Fields, they really need to have him rush more. He definitely, can break out some very big runs to help the Commanders win. And I just think the Bears defense will cause the Commanders to have one more mistake, one more incompletion, one more turnover than what the Commanders will against the Bears. Because I know Carson's a much better quarterback compared to Justin Fields at this point. But I'm just going to trust that the Bears defense, and being at home, can cause one more mistake out of Carson that cost the Commanders a 5th straight game, and probably, in my opinion, should be Carson Wentz's job with the situation perspective moving forward. So that's why I like Chicago here, -1, and Chicago straight up. The next game, the San Francisco 49ers over the Atlanta Falcons. I'm taking San Francisco here because, let's be honest, San Francisco, they have played really good and consistent football the last 2 weeks. Jimmy Garoppolo had 2 touchdown passes. He was 18 of 30, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, played an efficient game. Jeff Wilson had 132 yards rushing, the second highest for his career. I think really the biggest problem for the 49ers is going to be their ability to stay healthy. They've already lost Trent Williams. They've already lost Elijah Mitchell. They've already lost their backup running back. They didn't have George Kittle at the beginning of the year. Now they've lost Emmanuel Mosley to a torn ACL. Jimmy Ward broke his hand. Nick Bosa, just like his brother, is dealing with a groin injury. And they even lost their kicker, Robbie Gould, to a knee injury, and he couldn't finish the game, and Wisnowski had to finish kicking the game. So I think that is really going to be the biggest problem for the 49ers, is just really their own health. Because they keep losing a decent amount of people every week for a decent amount of time. I know, look, Williams can come back, Bosa will be back, Mosley won't be back, and Ward will be out an extended amount of time, and I think Robbie Gould will be back too. But that's just going to be the issue, is that Jimmy's going to eventually have to, depending on how many injuries he has, he's going to eventually have to just, he's not going to have anybody to throw to or protect him or just have anybody out there to help. And look, the Niners have, one of the best defenses in the league, number 1 overall defense in the league. And I'm going to go off the fact that the Niners, since 2019, the last 3 seasons, they've had 7 instances where they are playing back-to-back East Coast games. And I'm not trying to dox anybody, but the Niners, I always love when they do this. Whenever they come out to the East Coast, they have back-to-back East Coast road games. They always stay at the Greenbrier in West Virginia. They stay at the Greenbrier Hotel, so they don't have to worry about time differences or stupidity of traveling all the way out to the West Coast to fly back out to the East Coast. They'll be at the Greenbrier in West Virginia a week. They can practice, and then they can leave from West Virginia to go to Atlanta on Sunday before they go home the next week. And look, I think for the Falcons, they had a really abysmal start against the Buccaneers. They had their first 4 drives only amassed 99 total yards, 4 punts, and a missed field goal. Fortunately for the Falcons, the Bucs offense really wasn't that thrilling, but then they were able to make a nice bit of a comeback. 2 of their last 3 drives, they had 113 total yards and 2 touchdowns. Though the problem for the Falcons was with Cordell Patterson, Kyle Pitts being out, Mariota was their leading rusher with 61 yards, and Zacchaeus, I don't know, or Oladeus, and I probably said that wrong, but Zacchaeus, he was their leading receiver with only 39 receiving yards. So, to me, this is one of those games to where look, Patterson's going to be out at least the next 3 games. Pitts, you don't know if he'll come back. But I just trust, even with all the injuries to the Niners, I just trust this Niners team to go into Atlanta with their running game behind Wilson and that offensive line and Jimmy to play an efficient game and outplay Mariota. It caused Mariota to have 1 or 2 extra mistakes that cost them the game. And also the Falcons, just so everybody knew, just traded Deion Jones, their former prized and highly compensated linebacker, for only a 7th-round pick to the Cleveland Browns. So they just lost him. And I do want to say this. I felt horrible for Falcons fans because they should have been able to get the ball back about 3 minutes left. Grady Jarrett had a very weak roughing the passer penalty called on him. And I genuinely believe that was because it was Tom Brady. And I know people could say, look, Tua got thrown down and all that. And, they had to think of the changing of the rule and have to be more careful. But, it wasn't like Tom Brady. If everybody watches, Tom Brady actually tried to kick Jarrett after the end there. So, yeah, I just feel like with the Niners, even with all the injuries they've suffered and they've been able to win games without those guys anyway. And I think against the Falcons, depending on who's going to show up offensively, I think the Niners can just play another similar type of game. Jimmy can outplay Mariota. Debo can outplay every one of the Falcons receivers. And I think the Niners get this victory. And another consistent but, mundane Niners fashion. So that's why San Francisco here -6 and San Francisco straight up. The next game, the Cleveland Browns over the New England Patriots. Well, congrats to New England. New England got its 31st shutout in franchise history, the 14th under Bill Belichick. They were just absolutely dominant. Ramondre Stevenson had himself a day. He had himself a day and played a great game. I believe, had a career high in rushing yards. Also, Nick Folk he tied a career high with 5 field goals made throughout the game. Very nice done for him. And also, very fun fact here, Bill Belichick wins this game this weekend, he will tie George Halas for second all time in career victories at 324. I believe Shula is about 349. So Belichick would need at least another 2 to 3 years to possibly get that. I think he could do it, but who knows? But kudos to Bill there. And also a really fun stat I found out: QBs making their first start under Bill Belichick are 7-1 all time. And to me, I look at this Cleveland team, and the key thing is that they just don't want to rely on the best thing they have as their running game. They have the number 1 rushing attack in the entire league with Jacoby, with Hunt, with Chubb, who had 100 yards, or at least over 100 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns, including a big 41-yarder to start the game. But Jacoby in all 3 games essentially threw the game away for the benefit of the other team. And when I look at Cade York, boy, he's at a fall from grace. He made that huge 58-yarder in the beginning, in the end of that Carolina game. Everybody was shocked and impressed of how accurate, how deep, and how much clearing he had in that game. But ever since then, he's been up and down as a kicker. Ever since, he's missed a few extra points a couple times. And then, just when you need him to make that big, long kick, he misses it right. And the Browns lose again for the 3rd time in a heartbreaking way. They have lost 3 games by, I believe, a combined 6 points. That is brutal. You could argue they could be a 5-0 football team. But they are not. They are 2-3. But I just feel like with the Browns, Bailey Zappa is not going to be able to do as much against, if it's Bailey Zappa. Mac Jones was limited, so he is starting to get on the mend. But I remember they said that Mac Jones, they thought with that ankle injury that he was going to be out an extended amount of time anyway. They were thinking about putting him on the IR. So I believe that Bailey Zappa will get this start again. And I just think Cleveland, with their running game, with the confidence of Jacoby, knowing, Bill, even though it's the other way around too, I think Jacoby in this offense, with the weapons they have, just makes bigger, impactful splash plays. And I don't think the Patriots' offensive line can hold up against the Browns' pass rush, which should be getting more people back and healthy by the game. Will be an interesting game because I remember last year I was all confident in Cleveland beating New England with Baker Mayfield, going against the rookie QB and Mac Jones, and they ended up smacking them like 41-7 before the game kind of got sealed up. This one I just kind of feel like, again, like Cleveland is just a better overall roster. They have a better offensive line, better pass rusher. I think Jacoby can outplay Bailey. If Bailey can outplay Jacoby, then you're going to have to start thinking about for Cleveland, do we need to make a quarterback change? Because Jacoby just seems like he always gets the team in the worst possible spot, or the worst chance to win a football game if you look at the Browns season up to this point. So that's why I like New England here, -3, and New England straight up. The next game, the Green Bay Packers over the New York Jets. Kudos to the Jets. Man, what a game. It was nip and tuck all the way throughout. I want to congratulate Sauce Gardner, the 4th overall pick of this year's draft. He got a huge interception on Skylar Thompson after Teddy Bridgewater went down. It was also their first division win for the Jets in their last 12 divisional games. So if you think about it, that's 2 years. For the first time in 2 years, the Jets won a divisional football game, which hard to believe. And I think the biggest reason why they were able to be so effective was Breece Hall. Breece Hall had 197 total yards from scrimmage, 2 receptions for 100 yards, and 97 yards rushing. Fantastic day by him. The Jets defense really came up huge against that third-string quarterback, getting a lot of good pressures, getting a huge turnover in the game that basically sealed it. I saw that shiver that Quentin Williams threw out of Tyreek Hill. Wasn't a big fan of that, but I understood that, look, he said he was angry at Tyreek for not wanting to choose the Jets. And it's a grand scheme of things. It's kind of weird that we're both teams at this point are both above 500, but I'd probably rather be in the Jets situation right now compared to the Dolphins, which I never thought I would say at this point in the season. And also I want to congratulate Zach Wilson for the first time in his career. He won back-to-back games he started. And I thought he played a decent enough game. He did have one tough stretch where he had, couldn't really get out of the way from his offensive line, but he did have a nice 5-yard rushing TD, and he really, played a sound game and a more consistent game, and the Jets handled their business against the third-string quarterback. Once Teddy went out of the game and he was ruled out due to the new NFL concussion protocol, I didn't feel great about the game, but I thought Skyler through the first half, it was close, but it really turned on that Sanders missed 54-yard field goal, and the Jets just kind of moved the ball up and down at that point at a good rate. Kudos to the Jets, man. What a story. Where the Jets have the optimism, the Green Bay Packers are the exact opposite. The Green Bay Packers were up 14 and up 10 entering the end of the half against the Giants. And they just got absolutely boat raced through that second half. They only had about 2 first downs. They scored no points. They have had a horrible second half offense. They're very much like the Eagles that way. They really can't score in the second half. I do want to congratulate Mercedes Lewis. He becomes the first pick in NFL history for Aaron Rodgers to get a touchdown that was a former first-round pick. Every one of Aaron Rodgers' touchdowns throughout his entire career, up to that point, the Mercedes was thrown to a non-first-round pick. Mercedes Lewis is the guy to break that trend. Kudos to him in his 17th year for having his nice little brief moment. I think another big issue for the Packers is that 4 out of the 5 games they played this year, they've given 100-plus rushing yards on defense. It's not great. It's weak. And I definitely think with the Jets, with their running attack of Michael Carter and Breece Hall, I definitely think the New York Jets can run the football. And look, I took the Jets plus 7.5 because after you watch those two teams, you kind of feel like the Jets, they have better receivers. They seem to have some more confidence, and they're playing much looser compared to the Packers, who are really looking at their season maybe crumbling by a thread to the Minnesota Vikings if they lose this weekend to both New York teams, which I didn't expect it all to begin in the first place. And also, the problem I had yesterday was Aaron Jones leads the league in yards per rush, but he has the 19th most attempts running the football. You lead the league every time you touch the ball rushing it, but the Packers offense, Matt LaFleur and that staff said, no, we want Aaron to throw it. And Aaron, yesterday, in the 2 opportunities he had, could not connect. And it basically cost the Packers that game in a game that nobody outside of diehard Giant fans or just people that like going against the grain, they blew that game. And, look, the Packers are trying to do... the Packers haven't beat the Jets in Lambeau Field since 1994. So it's been going on 28 years since New York went into Lambeau and actually came out with a loss. I think they do because I think Aaron Rodgers, he's just a better quarterback than Zach Wilson. I think the Packers defense can make some more hay on the Jets offensive line that caused some mistakes. And I just trust the Packers to bounce back and get a big win over a Jet team that, look, if they play competitively, they're 500 through 6 games. That's all you could ask for. But in a game with Jets-Packers, with everything going on, I'm still going to take the Packers very slightly to beat the Jets in kind of an interesting, unique game for the weekend. So that's why I like Green Bay here to win straight up. I give New York Jets plus 7.5. The next game, the Jacksonville Jaguars over the Indianapolis Colts. This is one to where, look, you look at both these teams. Matt Ryan is only the third quarterback in NFL history to be responsible for 10 turnovers through a team's first 5 games. It was the first game, Colts Broncos last Thursday, was the first game since Week 7 of 2017 to have 7 field goals scored and no touchdowns. And look, I just mentioned all that stuff about the Jags. I'm just gonna go off of what I saw last week. Just in Week 2. I'm not saying the Colts are gonna get shut out again, but from what I've seen out of the Jags and what I've seen out of the Colts, I believe in the Jags team more enough to win this game with their offensive defense compared to Indy. Indy could definitely win this one because this is not in Jacksonville where the Colts have lost 8 to 9 straight games. The Colts, I remember last year when they played with Urban Meyer, they rolled up pretty well against the Jags in a meaningless spot. Or, I'm sorry, that might have been 2 years ago. My apologies. That might have been 2 years ago where the Colts got into the playoffs, beating the Jags at home in a tough way. Trevor also lost in Indy earlier last year, his first game against them. I'm just going to trust the Jags in this spot, win this kind of ugly game in a way to see who can really challenge the Titans for the AFC South. I think the AFC South was wide open because even Houston at 1-3-1, let's be honest, a couple breaks don't happen their way, or they beat the Colts. You're looking at a 2-3 football team and a 1-4 football team. So they would actually be second behind the Titans in the division right now, just for that kick alone. But at the end of the day, I think Taylor and that offense just won't be able to do enough. I think the Jags, look, they played pretty good defense. The offensive line held it pretty well, and I think Trevor rebounds and he plays a better effective game with the talent he has compared to Matt Ryan, who, again, that was an ugly game, one of the worst primetime games I've seen in a very long time. I think everybody would have accepted it. They just kicked field goals the rest of the way through. But I'm going to take the Jags here. She's going to go off recent experience from just Week 2. I think the Jags I've seen more consistent improvement. And I think the Colts, even though they're at home in that dome, I just don't feel like they have enough offense to really be effective. And Jonathan Taylor's help is going to be big too. He was dealing with an ankle sprain. He couldn't really come back after 4 days. Give him another 7 to 11 days. If he comes back, then I think this game will be a 50-50 toss-up. But if Taylor is out again with Hines being in the concussion protocol, I think the Jags win this one. So that's why I like Jacksonville plus 1.5 and Jacksonville straight up. The next game, the Minnesota Vikings over the Miami Dolphins. Kirk Cousins completed 17 consecutive passes to start the game, which set a brand new record in Vikings franchise history. And that was predominantly due to Justin Jefferson having a phenomenal first half. He had 10 receptions for 138 yards in the first half, and he played incredibly consistently. Though the problem was the rest of the way through, the Vikings offense kind of sputtered. Kirk Cousins threw a horrible interception, which led to a game-winning field goal. But then after that, Cousins and them were able to drive down the field with Thielen, with that entire offense, and score to go up 7, including a 2-point conversion. And that was a gritty win that throughout history or recent history the Vikings do not get. The Vikings have shown you over the last 3 weeks, instead of now losing those close games, they're now on the positive end of it, winning these close games, which, give them stuff to improve, but also a good feeling of that they're just handling their business moving forward. Also, I think the issue for me is that with the Dolphins is both quarterbacks are in concussion protocol. Tua, they haven't said anything about Tua, but he was already, ruled out, already through Monday. So, a whole other week. I don't know if he'll be able to get through again. If McDaniel rules him out this week, you don't know about Teddy. Even if Teddy plays, I don't really feel, great about picking him. because that offense did not look nearly as good even with him there. And he did get that safety calls on him, which caused the elbow and hip injury. And besides Raheem Mostert having 113 rushing yards, that Miami Dolphins offense really did sputter against the Jets in a shocking way. And I just feel like with the Vikings, with what they have defensively, what they have offensively, I just don't see Miami being able to match that well if Tua doesn't come back. If Tua doesn't come back, I'd still probably going to take the Vikings to win straight up, but I'll probably change my pick to the Dolphins +3 because I do feel like Tua definitely adds a lot more value and extension of the offense that Teddy Bridgewater just does not have at this point. And also, another key thing for the Dolphins has been a problem. The Dolphins, through 5 games, have only acquired 9 sacks through the first 5 games. So they have very little pass rush. And with that Vikings offensive line the way it is, with the talent that the Vikings have at receiver, I think that is a horrible mismatch that Kirk Cousins will expose throughout this game next Sunday. So that's why I like Minnesota here -3 and Minnesota straight up. The next game, the Cincinnati Bengals over the New Orleans Saints. That was the most points the Saints have scored offensively in a game since Week 16, Christmas Eve of 2020, where they put up 50-plus points on Mike Zimmer. And, you know, I just want to say, like, 2 things. Number one, I want to shout out one of the viewers that gave me this incredible stat, which maybe I should have used in my decision-making of taking the Bengals over the Ravens. Anti-Social Warrior gave me this phenomenal stat that entering that game yesterday, the Bengals were 1-9, and now they are 1-10 from the Thursday to Sunday shift. In the last 11 games for the Bengals on Thursday night to Sunday, they are 1-11. Or 1-10 now in those games after having 9 days of rest from Thursday to the following Sunday. So, there you go, Anti-Social Warrior. I told you I'd check you out. Thank you for giving me that statistic. I should have listened to you there and making my pick, but that was just a crazy aspect. And the Bengals, look, 8 points for 3 losses. All on game-winning field goals at the gun. That is just demoralizing. I think another key thing is T. Higgins. He's been able to kind of stay in the game, but he's had to leave the game for significant stretches of time due to injury, and that's been a big issue. And you know what, this game, it's just awkward to me. Where, like, that Saints defense definitely has defensive talent that they can rush the Bengals offensive line pretty well, which is at times has been very shaky. But I look at the Bengals, I look at what's going on with the Saints' injuries. I just can't see them with that Bengal defense as effective as it can be, being able to hold up. Especially if Michael Thomas and Chris Olave both can't play. I think that is a very much a good and solid, sound decision to go with the Bengals to win this game. Could the Saints win it? Sure, because the Saints defense can cause a lot of pressure on the Bengals offensive line. I think Joe could, definitely have some tough times or make mistakes like he did last week or yesterday against the Ravens after they had a big turnover on a 4th and 2 when Lamar missed a throw to Tyven Wallace. Joe Burrow threw a pick right back to Patrick Queen, which set up another field goal, which basically ended the game at that point. I think this game is going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. Joe Burrow going back to the Superdome where he won his national championship. As a former LSU Tiger, I think it's a great opportunity. But I think at the end of the day, the Bengals with their talent, but their consistent offensive line, and just better weapons around, should be able to beat the Saints team as banged up as it will be. Who knows? So that's why I like Cincinnati here, -1. And Cincinnati straight up. The next game, the Baltimore Ravens over the New York Giants. Look, the Ravens, man, they had themselves a day. John Harbaugh now is 16-2 all time on prime time television at home. So that's an incredible record. And Justin Tucker, the most talented and accurate kicker in NFL history, now has 61 consecutive field goals made in the 4th quarter. And this Ravens team, as gritty and ugly as it was, that's the type of Ravens football that people tend to enjoy compared to more of the flashy finesse style game. The Ravens went back down to basics. Lamar had a big 19-yard run. He had 56 total yards rushing, so he has about almost 400 yards rushing along with about 1,200 yards passing. He is definitely in the MVP conversation. I'd still put Mahomes and Allen ahead of him, and I probably even put Jalen Hurts ahead of him due to the difference in losses. But Lamar is definitely a top 5 MVP candidate from what I've seen this year so far. And with the Giants, look, the Giants are 4-1. This is their best start since 2009. And I think the key thing to me is Lamar has a skill set and a set of talent that Wink Martindale has seen before. This is a big opportunity for Ravens fans and for Wink himself to reunite with his former head coach that he was under, and John Harbaugh. And now under Mike McDaniel, let's see how well we do. But at the end of the day, I'm going to take the Ravens here just because I feel like Lamar and the defensive problems the Ravens have had primarily are through the air. They are a running team. We have pretty much held a lot of ground games in check for the most part. If we can shut down Saquon Barkley, depending on the health of the rest of the Giants' wide receivers, because last week, Tony, Shepard, who tore his ACL, Galladay, and I forgot the other one, Tony, Galladay, Shepard, and their fourth receiver. They were all out yesterday, and it did not matter. I think if we lose this one, I think that would be the issue. If it was like the running game and if they kept all the receivers, I might have taken the Giants. And I'm not going to be surprised at all. If you want an honest opinion, I won't be surprised at all if the Giants pull off this upset. Because they've been one of the best surprises in the league all year. But I just think with Lamar's legs, with Tucker as our kicker, with just the consistency of we are 2-0 on the road, putting up at least 20-plus points in each game, I think the Ravens can hold on and get a big road win to get to 4-2. To put themselves in a comfortable position in the AFC North moving forward. So that's why I like the Baltimore Ravens here to win straight up and get New York Giants +6. The next game, the Los Angeles Rams over the Carolina Panthers. This is one to where Matt Rule, breaking news for anybody out there that hasn't heard already today. Matt Rule, the Carolina Panthers head coach, has been fired. And he amassed a record of 11-27 through 38 games. He is a bum and a scrub as a professional football head coach. He was paid $60 million by the Carolina Panthers organization at the time, which I thought was ridiculous for a 7-year commitment. He is still owed $40 million by the Carolina Panthers. But after what I guess David Tepper had seen through the first 5 weeks, he had just seen a lack and piss-poor effort from every aspect of the team. So he decided to rip the Band-Aid off now. And now Steve Wilkes, the former Cardinal coach, former Browns defensive coordinator, is now currently the interim coach of the Carolina Panthers for the rest of this season. And with that being said, also Baker Mayfield suffered a ankle sprain and is likely he will be out for the next couple weeks. So, ladies and gentlemen, a man that has won 2 of the last 3 Carolina Panthers games finally gets an opportunity to start with Sam Darnold's injury. Everybody, let's give it up for Philip James, a.k.a. PJ Walker III. The man from Temple will finally get an opportunity that a lot of Panther fans have been waiting for and wanting him to ever since his last little stint in the NFL last year with the game against Arizona and the shutout victory 20-0 against the Detroit Lions. If you want my opinions on the Lions, I will get them to you next week after their bye because I need to relax and simmer about frisky Lions and Motor City Camp. So people that have watched these videos. But with all that being said, that's why I'm taking the Rams. As bad as that Rams rushing attack is, they have the worst rushing attack in the league. They're too Cooper Cup dependent. They're too Cooper Cup dependent, and I think even with that offensive line, I think the Rams can just make more plays. I just can't trust PJ Walker in that spot being able to make a big play with both offensive lines being bad. So I'll take the Rams pass rush over the Panthers. But with that being said, with both offensive lines being bad, I'm going to take the Panthers +9.5 because I think PJ Walker will be able to make some plays. And I think McCaffrey will be able to get through some holes to win this game. That was my big reason. There wasn't, after that, what I heard a little bit ago about Matt Rule and Baker, that basically there wasn't a lot of analysis needed. I don't think it's going to be a great win for the Rams, but if somehow PJ Walker and Steve Wilkes in their first interim game can beat the defending Super Bowl champions, at that point, I'm just going to say I don't believe the Rams will be a playoff team if that happens. I don't think they're going to win the division now anyway, and that's kind of a shock anyway, but I think if they lose to the Panthers with Steve Wilkes and PJ Walker as their quarterback and head coach, that will be a massive problem. So, But that's why I like Los Angeles Rams here straight up with the Carolina Panthers plus 9.5. The next game, the Seattle Seahawks over the Arizona Cardinals. This is one to where I'm just going to trust the better offense. Because both defenses are not great. The Cardinals had horrible clock management at the end of the game. Kyler Murray, in trying to execute the last 30 seconds of a 2-minute drill, slid down on a 2nd and 9 to a 3rd and 1. They had to spike it again to a 4th and 1 to get Matt Amendola, the former Jets and Chiefs kicker, come out for a 43-yard field goal. He missed it wide right. The worst thing for that was he had missed it wide right the entire practice session. Also, there was the big injury with James Conner leaving once again. I don't know if he was able to come back, but he left the game for the rest of the game. I do want to congratulate Eno Benjamin, though, in his place. He scored a second career rushing touchdown. I believe it was 11 yards to tie the game at 14, or to tie the game at 17, entering the late stage of the fourth quarter. And I just feel like the other big factor for me is this is the final game in the DeAndre Hopkins suspension. And I think if DeAndre Hopkins was in this offense, in this type of game with two very bad defenses, I think I would have probably taken the Cardinals to win. But with DeAndre being out one last game, from what I've seen out of the Seahawks offense compared to the Cardinal offense, I'm going to trust Seattle's receivers, Geno Smith as a quarterback, and their running game because, first of all, best wishes to Rashad Penny, who I believe they said fractured his tibia, and he will be out for the remainder of the year if surgery is required. And I just like Geno's stat line. He has completed 75.2% of his passes with 9 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. And Kenneth Walker, in his first action or long-term action, he did get a 69-yard rushing touchdown. And I'm just going to trust the Seahawks at home with that offense being able to outshoot Kyler Murray with his offense. And both defenses, I think the Cardinals' defense is a bit better, but I think it's not going to matter against the Seahawks offense, which has been able to move up and down the field basically at will outside of San Francisco. So that's why I like Seattle here plus 2.5 and Seattle straight up. The next game, the Kansas City Chiefs over the Buffalo Bills. I am taking the Kansas City Chiefs here, even though I know that, look, the Bills played a absolutely fantastic game. And to me, I looked at it and said, look, Gabe Davis had the second longest touchdown in Bills franchise history at 98 yards. The Bills put up 400 total yards in the first half. And they've had 3 dominant blowout victories. And the Bills had the only team in the league with a top 2 defense and offense, both in terms of points and yards for both perspectives. I am concerned about their running game because outside of Josh Allen's 225 rushing yards, combined, James Cook, Zach Moss, and Devin Singletary all have 351 rushing yards combined. So that's not great. And again, I haven't watched the Chiefs game because they're playing tonight as I'm doing this video. It comes down to me with the injury to the Bills secondary and their defensive line, and Von Miller I think left the game for a bit. I think he came back in the game, but somebody let me know. In this type of game, Mahomes and Allen, Mahomes is I think won 3 of the 4 or 2 of the 3 or 3 of the 4 or 4 of the 5 matchups against him. And in this kind of game with both defenses being shaky, with Mahomes and Allen's talent, I'm just going to trust Mahomes at home to win this shootout. Also, I think they want redemption for getting blown out by the Bills the week before. So, and when you have a shootout game with these two great quarterbacks in any kind of way, I will take Patrick Mahomes over Josh Allen every day of the week and twice on Sunday over Allen. If Mahomes gets, if Kelsey goes down or Frank goes down or you get a bunch of injuries tonight in this game against the Raiders, I could change my pick. But I was actually probably going to hedge my bet here because I thought the Chiefs were going to be the favorite, but since they are the underdog and I think they are genuinely going to win outright, that's why I went Kansas City plus 2 and Kansas City straight up on my pick. So that's why I like Kansas City here plus 2 and Kansas City straight up. I know it's going to be a bit weird, but I don't believe I had mentioned Tampa Bay and Pittsburgh. I am taking Tampa Bay here because even as awkward as they were offensive, they were not Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin suffered the largest blowout loss of his entire career. They definitely got redemption for what happened last year. They got redemption in Buffalo for what happened last year in Week 1. It was the worst loss the Steelers had since Week 1 in 1989. And every time that Mike Tomlin has had 4-game losing streaks,
the team usually doesn't make the playoffs except one time. And I just think with the next 3 games being Miami, or Tampa Bay, Miami, and Philadelphia, they're at least going to lose 2 of those. Depending on the quarterback situation, Miami could be a loss too. I think Mike Tomlin's going to be headed for his first losing season as Steelers head coach. So sorry for that little shift there, but I didn't realize that I didn't put Pittsburgh and Tampa Bay in there. So that's why I like Tampa Bay here -8.5. Tampa Bay straight up. And in the final 2 games, the Philadelphia Eagles over the Dallas Cowboys. This is one to where I'm just going to trust Jalen Hurts to outplay Cooper Rush. Both defenses are great. Both defenses, I think Dallas now has the lead in terms of total turnovers. Dallas and Philadelphia have been leading the league in sacks. Jalen Hurts has 19 rushing touchdowns through his first 25 starts. That's the most in NFL history. The Eagles offense, and I just want to mention this again, one last time. The Eagles offense in the second quarter, they mentioned this. They've scored 92 points through the in the second quarter. That's the most in NFL history through 5 games. In the 5 second halves they played, they've scored a grand total of 36 points. That's about 7 points a half in the second half through the season. That includes the Lions game, where they put up their most points. So I wouldn't be surprised if Dallas won. I think Dallas has a phenomenal defense, and the offensive line for the Eagles is banged up. Kelsey came back into the game, but he got hurt. Mailata was out. They lost Landon Dickerson, and really that offense really seemed to struggle. And I think that Cowboys pass rush can definitely cause some havoc. And the Cowboys won both games last year. But I think at the end of the day, this Eagles team has been the best team in the league for the last 3 weeks. They're the only undefeated team left. And I just think Jalen can make more plays than Cooper can. And if it comes down to both teams, not being able to run the ball effectively, I think the Eagles' offensive line holds up a little bit more than the Cowboys' offensive line against the Eagles' pass rush. And the Eagles win this game in a tight one. This is probably the game of the week, or the second biggest game of the week for me behind Buffalo, Kansas City. I'm really excited for it, but give me the better quarterback, give me the better roster, and give me the better kind of overall team aspect. And I believe that's Philadelphia over Dallas. So that's like Dallas here +5 and Philadelphia straight up. And lastly, the Chargers over the Broncos. The Broncos offense was a pop gun and sad. That was sad to watch. I'm not really happy about it. As a big Russell Wilson fan, and look, he's playing through a torn lat. But give me the Chargers here. Even through all the injuries, they were, even through all the crazy analytical crap that Staley put them through, I wasn't, impressed with it. But at the end of the day, the Chargers have more on their roster. Keenan Allen hopefully comes back soon. They're going to be able to run the ball a bit more effectively. And I just don't trust that Denver offensive line with Garrett Bowles being down against the Chargers pass rush, which has shown some flashes. And at the end of the day, Russell Wilson's just not comfortable with his receivers, where I know with Justin Herbert, he's been able to just turn chicken crap into chicken salad with the lack of receivers that he's had or the injuries he's had to go through where he's won games. The only thing that'll be interesting is, can Hackett or Staley make the worst coaching blunder? Because also I think that's going to be key too. Is Staley going to be too aggressive in a decision? Or is Hackett not going to be aggressive enough? Or Hackett's not going to be creative enough in a decision? And that's going to be the key, I think, difference in the game. And I think at the end of the day, Staley is going to be able to make one more aggressive decision that'll work compared to Hackett that it won't. So, that's why I like Los Angeles Chargers here -6 and Los Angeles straight up. And I believe I forgot one more game. No, I talked about Jacksonville, Indy. So, yeah, but that is it. So, those are my picks for this week. Like, comment, rate, and subscribe. Thank you. Please check out the NFL YouTube Prognosticators page. TJ Harmon, Johnny Talk Sports, Half Moon's Picks, Bridgewater's Finest. And sorry, Half Moon, I made a comment on one of his videos saying that the Lions could go 3-0. They're now 0-2. They're probably going to go 0-3 in this stretch. And the Lions are just still Lions, so my bad on that. But check out all the prognosticators. Also check out Fire and Brim Sports. Check out Shining Matthew Oliver Sports. These are sports fan entertainment. check out those channels. Check out those people. Luca Rosano, they make great content for the season like I do every week. And that is it. So until next week for week 7, where there'll be another 14 games, this is Matthew Fanatic saying best of luck to all coaches, players, teams, fantasy players, and fellow prognosticators. And until next week, this is Matthew Fanatic signing off. Until next time, so long.